No, no, that's okay. So now, now it's your turn, and please say a few words, as I was not capable of doing that properly.
No, thank you so much. I'll wait for my slides, but good afternoon, everyone. Going to talk about cultural diversity, so it makes a perfect transition with Anupama's presentation. I really would like first to thank Andreas, Olivier, the organizers, for having invited me. First of all, because it has triggered for me the interest in the compendium. To be honest, I don't have a look at it as regular as it should be, and then to have a look at it and to look a bit into, okay, what can it teach me about cultural diversity in Europe? Monitoring cultural policies around cultural diversities was really, really useful in the end. I'm a researcher at IMI Smith in the Vrije University of Brussels. Why was I asked to talk about this? Since, as I just told you, I'm not working enough on the compendium, because I've been working on these issues for a long time, especially assessing cultural diversity, which I would say a few words about during my presentation, and in general issues that are related to monitoring. So take what I would say as my look about the compendium, what is in there, what could be more. I know we don't have an infinite budget to work on this, but I hope there will be some useful ideas. Still, this one, okay. No. Not this one, so very bad. So this, okay, sorry. Well, I don't need to really think, to really say, I think, why we should promote cultural diversity, or the diversity of cultural expression, or the diversity of identities. It already been tackled upon before me. But let's say that it's really related to development issues, also to relate to something that was said before. As an economist, I would start by saying that it's to increase the choices for the people. But of course, it goes beyond that. It goes also about what the people really are, than only what they consume. More important for me is to say that although cultural diversity is quite a consensual objective, it's difficult to be against it. It's also dismissed because it's used to support or to protect a bit everything. So that's why I think it's important to be a bit clear about what it is, so that we can dismiss some ways to say, okay, this is for cultural diversity that are simply not correct. It is also, of course, important to define it, to assess it, if one wants to have empirical based policies to support it. Also then to assess the impact of policies. I will take the monitoring of cultural diversity policies from three angles in terms of what I think of one way to say what monitoring is about. For me, it's about defining, identifying, and finally assessing, especially the impact of the policies. Defining. First, why is it important to define? I think you need to define any policy, any concept, because you need a common basis to discuss it. It can be a prerequisite for assessment, but I will tell more about it later. And for what we are concerned here, I think it's really crucial if you want to evaluate policies that you define it. The way it is defined now in the compendium is this three list. It's not exhaustive because there might be some parts I missed, but especially have a look at what is in italic. So it's about cultural, linguistic identity, content, audiences, actors. Quite broad, but I don't think it's necessary to really be strict now about the diversity of what you should look at. What I think is more important and can be useful is to have an idea, a bit of a conceptual idea about what do you mean by diversity. And here I will propose you a model, the Sterling model, that defines diversity as a mix of variety, balance, and disparity. It's quite high level, let's say. It could be applied in different ways. I will try, if I still have time, to explain a little bit how it can be applied in relation to what is already on the compendium website. To understand the Stirling model, you first need to think that if you want to assess the diversity of something, you need to build a typology. And typology means what? You isolate a system. Let's say, for example, forget about the examples in italic because there's something more in relation to the compendium. Think that you want to assess the diversity of film production in Europe, okay? You want to look at one country. So your system in this case will be, you look at one country, you look at France, and you look at all the films there. You need to identify the elements. In this case, it will be the films, okay? And finally, because it's usually too difficult to work with this, you need to identify the categories, how you will group the elements. One important issue in France, and I think in Europe in general, about film is you have the US films who are very present in terms of share, but even more in terms of market shares and admissions. You have local films, and then you don't have much. So one interesting way, if you're interested in these issues, is to say, okay, the categories we're going to take are the origin and nationality of films. In this case, diversity, you can increase it in 3 ways. You can first increase the variety, which means you increase the number of categories. So you don't have only US films and French films that are in France, but you also have, for example, film from the rest of Europe. Okay, you have more categories of films. You can have a more balanced offer of films, which means that, okay, instead of having US films who are in some places, not especially in France, but in some places that are more than the majority of the screens, for example, over a year, you will have them having, I don't know, half of the screen or the same number of screens as other films. And finally, you can increase disparity, which means having more different films. And if, again, we focus more on the nationality of the films, you could say it means that instead of having only films from US, film from your country, film from the rest of Europe, you also want to promote policies that will give access to the people to films from South America, from Asia, from Africa, and so on. This is just an idea about, okay, how can you conceptualize that? Identifying the policies. What has been decided for the compendium is to have a general approach. So cultural diversity is considered as a transversal issue. And you don't have a specific chapter, but you take elements that are in other chapters, and you say, okay, if I want information on cultural diversity, I will have this and this and this sub-chapter. But still, doing this way, you focus really on monitoring the policies rather than monitoring the impact of the policies, or even more complicated, let's say, assessing the impact, assessing diversity itself, taking a few fields and assessing diversity. Also, I don't know if you know about it, but the approach taken here in terms of monitoring the policies, it's reminded me a lot of the Media Pluralism Monitor. If you don't know about it, really have a look at it. It's quite interesting also, where they identify the risks and challenges for pluralism over Europe rather than really how pluralism evolves. 2 minutes, so I will just finish with that, not the assessment. So this is how it looks like on the website. If you say, okay, I want everything relating to cultural diversity, you've got this, and you already have pre-checked a number of sub-chapters there, you can see on the right. A very quick scan, probably there are others, but I think, so something, again, very easy to implement. I think you should always have at least these 3 things. The 3.4, it's about international cultural cooperation, because, for example, that's where UNESCO is mentioned. And as you know, the 2005 Convention is quite important there. About gender and equality and cultural policies. And finally, about cultural participation and consumption. You also have provided with some statistics. And I think the following tables that I mentioned here that are also available on the company website should also be part of this by default package. And okay, of course, you can always think about some missing statistics and policies. I was missing something about model quotas, but I think it's nowhere on the, tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's nowhere on the compendium that there is an easy button where you click and you have all that relates to quotas around audiovisual, for example, or radio. Also, as I said before, and I think I will just conclude on that, and so that I am on time. Really, again, I want to insist on the fact that it's, of course, important to monitor the policies, but it's also important to look at the impact of the policies, okay? Especially because we were part of a study on the film production in the south of Belgium and the impact of two policies, which are Walimage and tax shelter. Tax shelter is federal, in fact. And these are more economic policy, or let's say industrial policies, especially tax shelter, but they do have an impact, a rather positive one, in fact, on diversity of film production from a more cultural aspect. So if you only look at the cultural policies, you can miss other policies that have an important impact. And also, as I said before, diversity is never really followed itself, rather the policies, except the diversity of the EU feature film production consumption. And I think this line of statistics could serve as a model for other statistics around other cultural sectors in the EU. Thank you.
Heritiana, thanks a lot. This thing of concentrating on policy, so I would say on the inputs rather than results, outputs. I clearly recognize it yesterday back in my ministry when we were kind of starting a process to update our cultural policy strategy. This was one of the main items of discussion, that we concentrate almost exclusively on the allocation of resources, that's the input, but we pay very little attention to the output, the results. And there would be numerous other examples. So thanks very much for pointing that out. And now welcome Vesna and Katrin. And